Dan Orlovsky shamelessly switched up on Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. We talk about what he said and what he apologized for, as well as the Mark Andrews situation taking a turn. All that and more coming up next on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here on this midweek edition of the show, making Locked On Ravens both a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. We're free and available for you on all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel, and also in audio form, where you can follow along and subscribe over there for 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage. That obviously does include the offseason. Even though the season's over for the Ravens, we still have shows every single day during the week, 5 days per week. The grind does not stop over here on Locked On Ravens, and I do anticipate going live later today, maybe around noonish, 12:30-ish in the afternoon, as John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta are scheduled to speak to the media today. So if you are tuning in before that, be sure to watch out for that live. And if you're tuning in after, be sure to go check out what I had to say about what John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta had to say about the state of the Ravens. So no time set yet, 12:30 or 12 is just my baseline for now, but obviously I will announce when that whole thing is happening. But today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5, get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Still doesn't really feel real that the season is over, for being honest, but it is, and the Ravens now enter an offseason of questions that they're going to have to answer about themselves, about their roster, about their coaching staff, and we'll obviously dive into a lot of that. But we do have some interesting comments from Dan Orlovsky. He's essentially switched up on Lamar Jackson based off of his tune during the year, trying to, be this big defender of the Ravens and Lamar Jackson and even Mark Andrews. And we'll talk about what he even apologized for in the first part of the show and what he had to say. Then in the second part, the Mark Andrews situation. Obviously, Mark dropped those two balls, had the fumble in the game in the divisional round. It was a rough day at the office for Mark. And obviously, there's been a lot of ugly that's come out of that, but there was some good that happened, and I want to highlight that as well as just talk about Mark in general. And then finally, we'll talk about Lamar's leadership on full display for those who could stomach it. Hard Knocks did come out last night, and there were some inside moments around the Ravens divisional round loss, and Lamar Jackson really taking on that leadership role. So let's dive into it. Dan Orlovsky switching up on Lamar and the Ravens here. And this honestly has been over the course of the last couple of days, ever since the divisional round. But essentially, for those that missed it, after the game on Sunday night, Dan Orlovsky said, if you put the loss on Lamar tonight, respectfully, you're a loser. Mark Andrews is one of the all-time Ravens. He had a brutal drop and a fumble. Yes, if you're going to use that to trash him, respectfully, you're a loser. And so Dan, again, was trying to say, hey, don't do this and don't do that. And so Dan went on First Take, and he apologized for those comments. He apologized for calling Lamar Jackson critics losers. He essentially said, quote, I probably shouldn't have said loser there in that tweet. I was in the moment in the game, so I apologize for that. I shouldn't do that and call people that. My reference to Mark wasn't about yes, we're very critical. Obviously, that drop, I was watching people just attack him, the person, and drag him, the person, and trash him, the person. That's why I said that about Mark. Of course, we have eyeballs. Those plays matter. I don't disagree with him about the fact that, yes, don't attack him, the person, and drag him, the person. Yes, I completely agree with Dan on that. 1,000%. Dan also said, I've done this when I was younger in the business as well. We can go on the next day and be critical of the person and not celebrate the failure. I've done that years ago, and I didn't want to be a part of that. I didn't want the media to be a part of that. And so I agree with Stephen A. in the comments. It's 100% on me. I apologized for people for kind of using that word loser. That's not okay. But I do think it's important for us to constantly have the conversation And I'll be honest with you guys, disagree with me if not. It's hard to be a little bit overly critical in that moment of Lamar, if I'm just being real, and it's our job. But having talked with him, you know how much he wants it. Like, you know how much winning the Super Bowl matters to him, both for his career, for his legacy, the way we talk about him. So when you go see him make those mistakes in the playoffs again, it rips at you and be like, I wish you didn't have that fumble because then we're having a different conversation. I wish that 2-pointer got caught because it puts it on Josh Allen and we can praise Josh Allen rather than knocking those guys. So again, very fittingly for Orlovsky, it all kind of goes back to Josh Allen. And that's kind of the point here, where it's about, for him in this moment, balancing analysis with fairness. And, shout out to Awful Announcing for putting out this article that kind of summarizes this entire situation, because Dan, in his MVP, campaign, I'm going to call it, for Josh Allen, was very overly critical of Lamar while propping Josh Allen up. And now Dan Orlovsky wants to play both sides and say, oh, Lamar wants it so bad and it rips at you to do this, and having talked to him here. And, I don't think Orlovsky's a full-blown Lamar Jackson hater. Like, I don't believe that. I'm not going to go that extreme on Dan Orlovsky. But I do think that the way that he kind of tried to trash Lamar to prop up his guy in Josh Allen, and we can admit that Josh is definitely Dan's guy, considering how that whole conversation went throughout the whole MVP conversation. This isn't even about the MVP, but you can't play both sides of it, right? You can't play both sides. And Dan's not going to go up there every single time and just trash Lamar. Criticism and analysis and being fair in that is what we want to see out of the national media, right? I think that's what we want to see. But essentially acting like nothing happened over the course of the last 3 months, that to me is just like, okay, we all saw it. We all talked about that. It was cool that Dan kind of came to Lamar's defense and came to Mark's defense. Most definitely. I'm not trashing him for that. I'm not trashing him at all. I'm not trying to trash him. I'm just saying that it's a both sides play here, where we're not just going to forget everything. It essentially be like Nick Wright or Mike Florio or Emmanuel Acho all of a sudden coming out and being like, well, this really isn't on Lamar, or, having a whole different full-blown conversation about Lamar Jackson. And there are fair things to criticize Lamar Jackson about during that game. Lamar, to me, is at fault for the Ravens losing that game. Not fully at fault. I think when you look down the list, Lamar is a guy that had a couple of mistakes and then bounced back from them pretty tremendously, but his mistakes were part of the reason why the Ravens were in that hole, right? I think that is fair to say that Lamar does deserve some of the blame, but to put all the blame on him is not fair. And so when Dan says, if you put the loss on Lamar tonight, respectfully, you're a loser, Dan's tweet there, I don't think it's right to put the loss fully on Lamar, but you can put the loss on some of the plays Lamar had, and you can put the loss on some of the plays Mark had, and you can put the loss on some of the plays the coaching staff had. And I think that it gets the hate that Lamar gets and some of the narratives, like Dan contributed to that, right? Like some of the conversations that were being had about Lamar and Josh Allen, and we talked about it here on the show, how toxic that conversation got. Like, some of the media narratives were prime factors in that conversation getting as toxic as it was in the build up to this game of two great quarterbacks, two great MVP candidates. And that's what it should have been about, is how great these two quarterbacks were. But instead we saw a lot of, whoever wins this game is going to have this legacy moment. And whoever doesn't, they're going to just be criticized into the ground. And obviously with Lamar, that criticism comes a little harsher than a lot of other guys. And we had that conversation a couple of days ago about, if you're going to have that conversation about Lamar and Josh Allen, you can't criticize him as if he is on the Mahomes level. But if you want to put him in the Mahomes tier, you can't put him in conversations with the other guys. Now, obviously, the way that this game went, it's going to change the narrative. And Josh makes it to a second AFC Championship game, and Lamar has only made one. That's a conversation that's going to be had. But national media narratives have contributed to how toxic the conversation around Lamar has gotten, in the way that Dan rode for Josh Allen. That's in his right to ride for Josh Allen, right? That's in his right, for other people to ride for Lamar Jackson. That's fine. But to come out and say, it rips at you and you want to have this, fair and just criticism and all of that, we have eyes for the Mark stuff and that whole conversation as well. again, the overall arching point here is you can't play both sides. There is certainly blame to place on Lamar, certainly blame to place on Mark Andrews, but I think the conversations are exaggerated, and there are multiple reasons why that's the case. One of which is because for the entire year, essentially, we talked about Lamar versus Josh Allen, and Dan was a big guy for Josh Allen who was using things against Lamar to prop up Josh, and that's kind of part of the reason. Again, not all. I'm not going to place all the blame here, but it's a big reason why, everything got so toxic. And here we are with, Lamar having to take responsibility, and he certainly did that, and I'm really proud of him for doing that. I know a lot of people are, and you wouldn't expect anything less from Lamar, of course. Lamar is very good at taking accountability, taking responsibility, and everything. But now we kind of have to sit here for a year until the Ravens make the postseason again, at least we hope, and hopefully buck the trend of them being underperforming in the playoffs. And that really is what it comes down to here. And coming up in the second part of the show, another player that underperformed was Mark Andrews, and his situation has gotten very toxic over the last few days, but there was a deed of good that happened, so we should have stayed tuned. A lot to get to on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings, whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs. FanDuel has you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Back here on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still talking with you here on this midweek edition of the show. Appreciate everybody for being here and making Locked On Ravens their first listen each and every single day. Again, we'll be going live sometime in the early afternoon, 12, 12:30, 1 Eastern, whatever time that is. We're going to react to that John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta end of season press conference. So be sure to stay tuned for that. Well, let's talk about the Mark Andrews situation. It has gotten very toxic over the last few days, extremely unwarranted with all of the threats that Mark Andrews has received, the negative comments. Look, the guy had a bad day. He had a horrible day. The criticism is just, it is fair to put some of the blame, like we talked about in that first segment, on Mark in this game. But that does not mean it is an excuse to, as Dan Orlovsky said, bash him as a person and attack him and threaten him. That is uncalled for. It is the lowest of the low, and I cannot condemn it enough. It's one thing to criticize someone's play on the field, right? We do that here on Locked On Ravens when it's due. What I do not tolerate, and what no one should tolerate, is people going out there and attacking Mark, attacking the people he's close to. That has also been a thing that's happened, and that part of this whole thing has been very, very ugly. Mark obviously did not speak to the media after the game. He did not speak to the media during locker cleanout. He is obviously feeling bad. He's feeling upset. He's feeling all these different types of emotions, devastated. You can see it on the Hard Knocks, which we'll get to in the final part of the show, kind of hitting his elbow against the bench and just looking devastated, and his teammates coming up to him and consoling him, teammates having his back. Again, it doesn't give anybody an excuse to do what has happened to Mark over these last couple of days. But there was a little bit of good that happened on Tuesday, or at least throughout the last couple of days, and it has gotten picked up by the Ravens, by national media. Bills fans have shown support to Mark Andrews. Mark has the breakthrough T1D, as obviously Mark has type 1 diabetes, and they're supporting this cause. And breakthrough T1D works towards curing and improving the lives of those dealing with type 1 diabetes. And Bills fans have donated nearly $32,000, a charity that Mark Andrews supports, in breakthrough T1D. And again, this is, Bills fans are known for doing this, and Bills fans have been, very gracious. And, this is an incredible act of kindness from them. And they did this with, I think they did it with Andy Dalton when he beat the Ravens to put the Bills in the playoffs. They've done it with Lamar Jackson. I believe that was after he got injured the last time these two teams played in the postseason. Bills fans has Bills Mafia has a lot of good people in it. And Ravens flock has a lot of good people in it. And I know that with Mark, he certainly, I can guarantee you that Mark appreciates this. And again, it's a tough time for him, but the Bills fans showing support. Obviously, Ravens fans have shown support for Mark and have donated as well. It's a really good thing that's happening from a really bad situation. And that, to me, that's what I want to fully highlight, right? Because all of the negative comments, all of the threats and the personal attacks, that stuff is never, ever warranted. Criticism wise, sure, on the field, yeah, we can talk about that. I've been critical of Mark for his game. I've been critical of Mark for his playoff performances. But I'm never going to come on here and trash somebody personally for their on-field performance. That's just it's not right to do that. It's not right. And so to have this happen, to have these donations flood in and pour into obviously the foundation that Mark supports, as I said, huge act of kindness and, a lot of respect for everybody involved who is making that happen. So shout out to everybody who has gotten in on that action. And, for Mark, it's going to be a long off season. He's going to have to hear everything, and hopefully he can tune it out as best as he can, put his head down, get back to work. And there are conversations about Mark and what his future with the team could be, whether he is kept, cut, traded, restructured, whatever that looks like. And I know there are very differing opinions on what the Ravens should do with Mark and how they should handle his situation. For those that don't know, if the Ravens do cut or trade him, they would free up $11 million in cap space. He has a $17 million cap hit right now. That's not a small amount of money. They have Isaiah Likely waiting and Charlie Kohler. I feel like this upcoming year, if they do decide to keep Mark, is the last year that he and Isaiah Likely will be together. One of them will be in a different uniform after next year. And I would be pretty floored if they chose Mark over Isaiah Likely in that situation. I think you just kind of have to move on after next season at the very latest. And that's not about Mark in the game. And that's not about, it's just a matter of you can't pay. It's like Roquan and Patrick Queen. You can't pay two linebackers. You can't pay big money to two tight ends. You can't. And Isaiah's going to get paid like a tight end one because he is one. So personally, in my opinion, I believe a restructure is probably what should happen here. I think Mark is too valuable, even if the playoff performances haven't been there. And I completely acknowledge that they haven't. But I think that people are just kind of throwing the chemistry that he and Lamar have out of the window and saying that just grows on trees. Spoiler alert, it does not grow on trees. Lamar and Isaiah have an awesome connection. It's awesome. But Mark and Lamar have been working at this for 7 seasons now. They're going to go into their 8th year next year together. That just, it doesn't happen. 3 years compared to 7 years is very, very different. So I'm not saying the Ravens couldn't survive without Mark Andrews. I think they could. But it would be a loss, and I see some people talking about it like it's not. And, I do not agree with that personally. I think it would be. So, Mark's going to have to come back from this, and he's going to have to be, pretty mentally strong about it the first time he talks to the media, whenever that will be. I have no idea. I think locker cleanout was the last time that the media would have the chance to talk with Mark until, workouts come along in a couple of months. May, maybe June, could even be training camp. I don't know. But the first time Mark speaks to the media, all that he's going to hear about and all the questions are going to be about his game against Buffalo. And, obviously it's the most important thing that Mark is in a good space and that he is able to work through this. It's not easy on him. I mean, you can tell the space that he's in. And I just hope everything is okay with him. But what we saw in terms of the generous donations and the generous acts from Bills fans, Ravens fans, etc., it adds a good chapter to what otherwise has been a very ugly situation in multiple different ways. But coming up in the final part of the show, Lamar's leadership was on full display during Hard Knocks. We talk about that as well as how the team has to respond. So be sure to stay tuned. Lots to get to here on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Talkspace. Therapy is a game changer. It can help manage stress, improve sleep, and communicate more effectively. But finding the right therapist and fitting sessions into a busy schedule can be a challenge. That's where Talkspace comes in. Talkspace, the leading virtual therapy provider, makes getting the help you need easy, accessible, and affordable. With Talkspace, signing up is simple. You can match with a licensed therapist who fits your needs, usually within 48 hours, and it's convenient. You can have sessions from the comfort of your home and even message your therapist between appointments. Plus, Talkspace is covered by many insurance plans, and for most insured members, there's a 0% copay. It's never been easier to prioritize mental health. Therapy has so many different benefits, and so many people have benefited from those. Plus, it can help you learn a lot about yourself as well. As a listener of this podcast, you'll get $80 off your first month with Talkspace when you go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnNFL and enter promo code SPACE80 to match with a licensed therapist today. Go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnNFL and enter promo code SPACE80 to get $80 off your first month and show your support for the show. That's Talkspace.com/LockedOnNFL, promo code SPACE80. Back here on Locked On Ravens Wednesday edition, Kevin Oestreicher here with you still. Appreciate everybody for tuning in today. I know it's tough to tune in when your team loses, when the season ends. And for those who are, I genuinely appreciate it. And for those who might need a little break from Ravens content, or maybe you'll come back when the season starts up again, or draft, free agency, I get it. I understand. I would love it if you stayed along for the journey, but I completely understand. We have a lot of exciting things coming up this offseason, so I would love for everybody to stick around. We're doing a whole video audio revamp, and we're going to have a lot more content for you here that I'm excited about. So, Ravens content-wise, we're still here for you. We're breaking everything down. We're figuring out how this team can improve, how they can get over that playoff hump, because they really need to, or else more serious conversations are going to have to be had. If you were able to stomach watching Hard Knocks, I had to go back and forth. It was tough to watch it at times, but obviously, since I do host this show, I wanted to have it for content and for context of just, knowing what happened during the game. Lamar's leadership, I've been blown away with Lamar all year. And, mini side note, shout out to Marlon Humphrey for his growing in the leadership category as well. I think that he did a really good job there. But Lamar Jackson, every year has grown in that category. And multiple times during Hard Knocks, you saw after that failed 2-point conversion, Lamar, consoled Mark Andrews and made it very known to him and tried to hammer it through to him. And I don't know, Mark probably was just so devastated at that moment, but Lamar goes up to him and says, "It's all of us. We're a team. It's all of us. It ain't just you." And, in the locker room after the game, it was gut-wrenching to kind of hear some of the behind the scenes there. He says, "I don't let it linger, but I just know how these types of games be. That's why I kept saying, man." And he ended up saying, "I'm mad, bro. I ain't going to be all right." Like, that stuff hurts. Like, that pierces your heart. He's sitting there, head in his hands. Like, it hurt him. But through all of that, through that pain, he was still able to be a leader. And that's what it is. Through the good and the bad, you rally around your team and you make sure that they understand that it is a team. It's no singling anybody out. Lamar, as I mentioned in the first part of the show, is very good with taking accountability and not, throwing somebody under the bus. It's a whole thing for him where he contributes to that. His teammates contribute to that. And that's what he kind of lives by. And I expect Lamar to come back next season being an even better leader. Like that is what it's been for Lamar, where coming into the league, he had leadership qualities. I think that's one of the more interesting Lamar misconceptions, I would say, where people are like, "Oh, he had no leadership skills coming into the NFL." That's not true. Well, Lamar did have leadership skills. He just was a different type of leader. I think when people are acquired or leaders, people don't acknowledge them as leaders. And I don't think that's right. I think Lamar did have leadership qualities coming into the NFL. Obviously, as a rookie, he wasn't asked to lead that team in terms of let's go. There were other guys who were leaders on that team, and Lamar came in and didn't even start his rookie season. But obviously, as the quarterback, you become a starter. That responsibility starts to fall on your shoulders more and more. And this year, I just think it's been he teaches his guys in teachable moments. He gets on guys for perfection. And that's something that I think it rubs off on everybody. And that's a big thing, where you can even talk about a guy like Jaden Daniels, let's say. Right? Jaden Daniels is one of the most poised rookies I've ever seen. ever seen in the NFL. The Commanders, that rubs off on them. Like the attitude of your leader, the mindset of your leader, that rubs off on your teammates. And for Lamar, I think that certainly did. He even went up to Josh Allen. We know the viral clip and picture of him running up to Josh Allen after the game, showing that sportsmanship. Jackson said, "Good game, bro." And, Josh Allen obviously gave him love back. He said, "Nothing but love. You're a stud, man." Jackson said, "Keep doing your thing, baby." Josh Allen said, "I love you, Jackson. Go get some, man." Like, these two have a lot of respect for each other. And I know a lot of people, we talked about how, Lamar said he didn't hang out with QBs in the offseason. And, I'm not your friend. I'm trying to beat you. But there's a lot of respect between those two guys. I just don't get how you see interactions like this. And I'm not talking about, people who support Lamar or like Lamar or whatever. For the people who don't like Lamar, I don't see how you can look at these things, these clips of him being extremely kind to media, a leader for his teammates, an example on and, off the field doing his thing, giving back to his communities and being polite and everything, and supporting even his opponents and saying, "Yeah, I don't really like that guy." I mean, why? Like, I don't see how you can hate Lamar Jackson. I don't, Lamar's not cocky. Lamar is not this guy that will like brag in your face. Lamar doesn't like get angry to the point where like he's throwing tantrums. I think people look at Lamar's competitiveness and think, "Oh, Lamar's throwing tantrums." That's not what's happening. It's not what's happening. Were people getting mad when Tom Brady was throwing fits on the field and slamming helmets and yelling at teammates? Lamar doesn't even do all that type of stuff. He kicked the ball once and he gets passionate. Like, are we going to excuse Tom Brady's passion? Travis Kelce pushes his coach and everybody's talking about passion, but Lamar Jackson does something and that's not, and that's a different conversation. Like, obviously I went a little off topic there, but it's not really off topic because Lamar still gets hate and he's like one of the nicest dudes in the NFL. Like, I don't get it. My theory, and you've heard this if you're an everydayer, I've said this before, my theory is that people didn't like that they were wrong about Lamar Jackson, and people are just so stubborn about it that they have to continue to try to be right about him. When in reality, he just, outside of the playoffs thing, and I know that's a big conversation, which, by the way, this was Lamar's best playoff game, in my opinion. 2 very loud turnovers. But the way that he bounced back, the conversation is more so on those turnovers because, yes, they were mistakes and they directly contributed to losing the game. And I'm not excusing him for that. But everything outside of the playoff narrative for Lamar, he's blown that out of the water. And so now everybody's kind of harping in on that. But again, I still do believe the Lamar playoff thing is overblown. I think the Ravens playoff thing, that's not overblown. The Ravens have an issue. And as I said on yesterday's show, I said it on the live show we did after the loss, no one's going to care what the Ravens do, like even to a lesser extent than this year. Because obviously when the Ravens lost the championship game last year, I remember I sat on that live show, and I sat on the shows after that, and I said, who cares about the regular season? Like, what could they do in the regular season that would make you be like, "Oh, wow, yeah, this is great. Like, this team is so ready for the playoffs, and they're gonna win it all." Like, we can have confidence in the regular season, but I don't think heading into the playoffs, anybody's going to think, "Oh, yeah, the Ravens, like, that's a team that really shows up in the moments in the playoffs," because they haven't. They haven't. And that is on Lamar. It's on John Harbaugh. It's on, Todd Monken. It's on other players. Like, it's on everybody. Defense in the first half. The defense in the first half of these last 2 games, losses, have given up 38 points in the first half. Second half, it's been 6. They start too slow. The Ravens, when the bright lights are on in the postseason, they either blow you out and embarrass you, or they embarrass themselves. That's been the reality. So Lamar has contributed to that. Again, I do not think he is the sole reason why the Ravens have not won in the postseason. I think it's ridiculous to say that. He's a part of it, but he's not the sole reason. But the Ravens, that narrative is going to be there, and the Ravens can do whatever they want in the regular season. They could go 17-0. They could win the division by 5 games. They could be the best team we've ever seen in the regular season. No one's going to care. No one's going to care. Because we don't, why do you play the game? You play the game to win Super Bowls. You don't play the game to have a great regular season and then fizzle out in the first or second round. So a lot of interesting conversations to be had, and we'll certainly have them over the course of this offseason. We're just settling into offseason mode, and as I mentioned, we're 5 days a week, regardless, in season, off season. We always have you covered here on Locked On Ravens. So that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Again, we'll be live here later today, sometime in the afternoon, 12, 12:30, 1:30, whatever time that is. We'll be live here talking about what John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta had to say about the state of the team during their end-of-season press conference. So be sure on the way out, hit that like and subscribe button in video form and follow along in audio form, and I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.